we'll do the live thing first. Like. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Bigmark podcast. It's me, your host, Bigmark. If it's your first time listening, welcome. If not, welcome back. Like I always say, if you're watching on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button, hit the bell for the notifications so you know when our next video comes out. Wherever you're listening, please give us a 5-star review. I know it doesn't sound like much, but it really helps the podcast. Please share it with your friends if you'd like. If you want to reach out to us at any time, hit us up on our Twitter or Instagram at the Bigmark Podcast or at the Bigmark Pod. And if you want to support the podcast, check out our Patreon, patreon.com/thebigmarkpod. It's always a pleasure to have our guests here, and it's a great pleasure to have Mr. Jody Aberdeen in the studio. How are you?
Doing great, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Great to see you.
Yeah, thanks. This is what I was saying before. I was like, this is the most professional setup I've had for a podcast interview in my life.
I appreciate that. I'm honored. I'm honored to say that. Is this your first podcast?
It's not my first podcast. My first non-Zoom based podcast interview. And I genuinely feel like a rock star. You've got all the stuff here. It's great.
I got you water.
You got me water. You know what? I feel like we could have gotten some more heavier stuff if I didn't have to drive home tonight.
I know, right?
Down for that, but definitely
100%.
Amazing. Yeah.
And again, you know what I mean? Like it's one of these things where there's no limit. You can always come back. We can always do another time. And it was funny because we're trying to work this a little bit into our schedules because of kind of the dates that are coming up really soon, right? And we wanted to kind of get this in. It's what is the date today? The 20th?
The 20th today, June 20th.
June 20th, and in 5 days is Mr. Anthony Bourdain's birthday.
Yep, June 25th.
June 25th.
5 days, 4 days.
5 days, 4 days. When this comes out, this will be coming out on Wednesday, so it'll be like 3 days.
That's right.
Yeah.
What is time even?
I know.
Yeah.
And you might be watching this at some other time, long after or next year or whenever, right? But I mean, June 25th, half Christmas. It's hard. It's hard to forget that one, and it's hard to forget, obviously Anthony Bourdain too. And the kind of way we kind of got into the idea of even having Jody on was we were talking about Anthony Bourdain, and you had started a new Instagram account. You want to talk to everyone about that?
Yeah. It was really cool because we had working at the same place and passing each other like ships in the night type of thing. Me coming in for a shift, you going out to do your stuff, and we never really got to talking. So this one time, not all that long ago, I suppose now, a couple weeks ago, finally had a nice in-depth conversation with you.
For sure.
And I forget how it came up. But Anthony Bourdain's name came up. It might have been around June 8th, was the anniversary of his suicide. And came up a conversation. I mentioned that I'd run this tribute account to him called Stories of Uncle Tony. So Bourdain, I'm sure we'll get more in depth into how that came about, but and why Anthony Bourdain meant so much to me personally, even though I never met the guy like so many others.
Sure.
But it started the year before the pandemic, so 2019. A friend of mine had announced that he was getting married in Colombia.
Cool.
And realized that we're going to Cartagena, which was the scene of the first episode that I'd ever seen of No Reservations.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
So cool.
And I thought, well, I'm the only one out of my friends who's able to go, who's available. He gave us like a month's notice.
Right.
And I thought, okay, this is going to be me traveling like Anthony Bourdain. I'm going to take everything I've learned over the years from the guy,
cool,
and put it together. So the account started out as a way to tell that story. And then I thought, well, that's a little limited. Why don't I expand it to having just people? There's got to be tons of people, obviously millions of people who were touched by him somehow.
Sure.
And they made big decisions. And so I created that account to say, look, this one's for the fans. Share your stories. Did you get to meet him? Did you go to a place because of what he did? Are you in the hospitality industry? Like let's share your story. So the account kind of grew from there, and it coincided with, because he died in 2018. This is 2019. It coincided with the very first Bourdain Day.
Oh wow!
So I documented my trip to Colombia in April, and when I came back, they had announced the Bourdain Day stuff, and it was coming up to the 1 year anniversary of his death, and there's a lot of outpouring, a lot of conversation. It was still very fresh. People couldn't believe he was gone.
Right.
They couldn't believe he was gone at that particular time with everything going on in the States and everything going on worldwide. And this was so the account basically took off from there. Simple format. You tag me in something, or I search the hashtag on Instagram, Anthony Bourdain.
Right.
Somebody posts a really cool story. I will reblog it with attribution so you can see the name.
For sure.
The person with a little bit of commentary in mine, of my own before it. And that became it took off from there.
Absolutely.
I was getting requests for tags. I was getting people now DMing me.
Cool.
And yeah, it took off from there. And it's been 3 years now.
Wow. No way.
Yeah.
It's been that long. Because I think actually potentially how it started was, I think I followed you on Instagram, and then I saw that that both accounts were linked.
Right. Yeah, that's
what
right.
it was.
That's how
and
it happened.
And I was like, hey, I did a podcast about.
That's what it was.
Right.
That's right.
So for everyone who's watching, if you haven't seen it, I had done an episode about Anthony Bourdain, the solo podcast I do. You know, I like to have a topic, kind of make things a little bit more streamlined when I'm just kind of like soloing it. But again, you know, Anthony Bourdain was, you know, we kind of had we chatted about it briefly, but, and I've spoken about this, you know, momentarily in other podcasts, but growing up, I was like, one of my favorite channels was the Food Network. And not only because I was like a little fat kid, but it was like my grandmother and I watched it a lot. My grandmother was really into cooking. She had worked in kitchens and stuff. She was from Lithuania, and again, coming over, you know, making your own food was important and, you know, economical and doing all that stuff, right? So she was always about cooking, and this would have been, you know, late 90s, early 2000s at the time. A lot of the shows on the cooking channel were cooking shows, unlike today, which are it's very different. You know, it's a lot of Iron Chef contests and Gordon Ramsay yelling at people and stuff. But it was back then actually people cooking. Emeril Lagasse doing his thing, Bobby Flay, people actually teaching you you could watch the show and actually probably cook along with it. You know what I mean? But right around the late 90s is kind of when Anthony kind of started coming on the scene, right? And he kind of started he started with No Reservations.
No, he started with a cook's tour.
A cook's tour,
That was the very
right.
first one, yeah.
Okay,
with
cool.
the super ghetto 2000 era graphics and production values.
And that was on the Food Network, right?
I think it was...
Because he went to the Travel Channel at one point.
Yeah, I don't know if he was on Travel Channel at the time. I don't remember at this point. I know now he is. You can access the entire series for free via the YouTube channel for that. But I think originally it started out kind of small. I think he was on Food Network initially, and it was difficulties that he ran into with the network that led him to basically take it. You know, they basically cut him loose, or he cut them loose, and that's when Travel Channel picked him up.
Totally.
Something like that.
And again, watching all these other cooking shows, it was like, oh, cool. You know, when is this guy going to like show us how to cook, essentially? But the travel aspects of it and again, Anthony Bourdain has such an interesting way of looking at things, and his prose and the way he writes is so distinct that I think that's what was such a big part of the show, obviously. But again, just his general attitude about like going new places, trying new things, you know, not really like caring what anyone else had to say about it, and doing it like in a kind of rock star fashion, right? Like, I mean, that was his whole thing, right? And watching that was like, oh man, like it just makes you want to go to all these places he's been, right? It makes you want to try all this food. And I mean, I think the only thing he really didn't like was like that fermented shark, right?
I think he had a few things, but that fermented shark in Iceland
was the worst, at least. Exactly.
No one. I've seen other travel hosts go there. I think Andrew Zimmern went there. Right. I think a few others. No one likes the Icelandic fermented shark. But here's the weird part. Okay. That makes me want to try it even more.
Of course.
Yeah.
Well, I want to know why people don't like it. Like, it's like... food is one of the most interesting things, and it would be so interesting to be a food writer because it's hard to explain what something tastes like. It's almost like explaining what a color looks like.
Yeah.
Right? It's you know, it's in a sense an art form as well too, right? So just writing about it is one thing. You can write about the experience and how it makes you feel, but like the actual taste of something, right? You have to actually try it, right? So Again, I wouldn't necessarily say I'm I'm not picky when it comes to things. I'm not the most adventurous eater potentially, but again, when you get put in a situation, you got to try things, right? And I think so. Well, I was in Portugal not too long ago, so I watched. That was No Reservations in Lisbon, right?
In Lisbon,
and that was like around 2008 is when he was there, I think, with that episode, and he was talking about, I think it was like pig knuckle or something, and I remember eating something like that, and they didn't really say what it was. It was just this like really weird, crunchy, fatty, cartilagey kind of like thing. And it was good. Like, and maybe I'm not going to eat the whole plate, but like, I'm going to try some of it again. Right.
Yeah.
Once you're there, you're kind of there, and you got to kind of jump in with both feet.
Yeah.
I was in Thailand. I was in Bangkok, and I was only in grade 9, and I didn't have that outlook because there was so many there's so many things you can try, but, we were also there for a basketball game, so we were just like not very adventurous.
No, I feel that. I have regrets. My ex-wife and we honeymooned in Cancun.
Okay.
But this is pre-Bourdain.
Okay.
And very suburban upbringing for the both of us. She didn't want to, like, she was scared of Mexico. Okay. I wanted to go to see Chichen Itza.
Cool.
And to try actual food, because I'd started watching Chef Rick Bayless. Topolobampo is a restaurant that he runs. I think he still runs it in Chicago.
Okay.
But he had a show called Mexico One Plate at a Time. I was watching these cooking shows. I think around the same way you were, right? It's same thing. Fat kid growing up, loves food.
Yeah.
Got a really sensitive palate. Can try different foods from different cultures. Parents from Trinidad, also used to having diversity of food. Unreal. We were eating well all the time. I want to learn how to cook. As a kid, I never thought about being a chef. That didn't attract me, but I liked the idea of cooking my own meals.
Yeah.
And so I started watching these shows.
Cool.
In Mexico, had I been with a different partner, or had I been more adventurous, say, look, honey, stay in the hotel. I'm going to go to the street cart and have a taco. You see, Bourdain had showed up 2 years before he did.
Right.
That would have been me trying it instead of being afraid all the time. Because he pointed out very rightly a few times that when you see a place in the street, like a night market or something, and you see people lining up to eat the food and so many people eating the food, it's like you don't get that popular by poisoning your customers.
No kidding.
So obviously you can, with Mexico, the concern is always the water, getting Montezuma's revenge, etc. But you can take pills for that.
Sure. Yeah, for sure.
So if you're worried about your own sensitive Western, sanitized, McDonald's suburban stomach, gut lining, not being able to take the food, take a couple of pills or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Go and eat the food. Try something new. Get out of your comfort zone.
100%.
If I'd had that, so I have those regrets too. Of like, I wish he'd shown up. Most of my traveling happened prior to 2007.
Okay.
And prior to my time with Bourdain, right? Like with him in my life as a TV figure. Mm-hmm. I wish I had done that, because then I would have pushed my parents. A lot of my trips were with family.
Cool.
Would have pushed my parents to say, okay, no, let's not go to McDonald's tonight. Let's not eat the hotel restaurant.
Yeah.
Let's see what's around the corner.
Yeah.
Right?
Where's the lineups? Where are people sitting? Exactly.
Yeah. And just to sort of piggyback off of, I've never been to Portugal.
Okay.
But I remember that here in Hamilton, we have Art Crawl every second Friday on James Street North. And there's the restaurant, Dunas Verdes.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
Have you been there?
I haven't been to Dunas Verdes, but I've been to the Wild Orchid.
To the Wild Orchid. Yeah, I've been to that too.
100%.
Yeah,
and then there's the Grasshopper, I think was Portuguese.
Yeah.
And then the Bakery Ola. Anyway.
Yeah. So there's like strong Portuguese like food scene there, right?
Totally.
Just in those locations alone,
100%.
Right?
Yeah.
And I remember it was Art Crawl. It was the first Art Crawl after his suicide.
Okay.
And I thought, I got to go do something. So first there's Jack and Lois. I went there and hung out, right? But it was Dunas Verdes that got me.
Yep.
Because like I've never been here. I walk past it all the time. It seems more authentic. It's more for the people who are Portuguese, which is what I want, right?
Sure.
I sat down. It turns out they had this white bean seafood and rice dish that they only prepared for Art Crawl.
Wow.
And I realized, I thought at that moment, it's like, I've never had anything, like knowingly, ever had anything Portuguese before prepared for me.
Interesting.
And I sat down. It's like the most delicious, like you could have, like, you've got the seafood. And again, now we're into the food description problem, right?
Of course. Right? It's all right.
I remember thinking like, oh man, it's like I could taste the seafood element to it, right?
Totally.
Nice fish, good rice.
Right.
And just felt really good. The richness of the sauce, right? it had body. It's just great, right?
How was it prepared? Like
wonderful meal. It was on rice.
Okay.
And I had to use a spoon.
Okay.
But everything was there, right? It's just perfect meal. The white beans.
Totally.
And this is a combination I never would have thought of, right?
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have sat down. How many times have I walked past that restaurant?
Sure.
And that was partly why I had just come back from Montreal.
Okay.
And this actually ties into, well, so my then girlfriend and I had gone with her friend from Boston,
cool,
to a U2 concert.
Oh, awesome.
And Montreal was also on my list because of Bourdain, because I thought, okay, Au Pied du Cochon is there.
Right.
We ended up at La Banquise, which is another place that he stopped for the poutine, which I didn't realize was a stop of his when we were there.
Oh, cool.
Until afterwards. I was like, oh, wow, that's right. He actually did go there.
No way.
And like we didn't get to go to Au Pied, we didn't get to go to Joe Beef, but we tried different places. I followed the example. I remember we were in the Uber going somewhere, and the Uber driver had never heard of Anthony Bourdain, so I'm sending him, dude, you got to look this guy up. You're going to get people coming in from Montreal all the time because of his shows. You're going to Uber someone around, right?
For sure.
So we're talking food. This guy, this fucking Uber driver out of nowhere, right? And it was just so great. I'm chatting him up. And at Au Pied du Cochon, we went there. It was closed. It was late night, right?
Okay.
And I think it must have been like a Monday or something. They're not open. But I remember there's a counter in that episode where he went to Montreal. I don't know if you recall, but Martin Picard basically served him what amounted to a 12-course meal of nothing but foie gras related stuff.
Yeah.
And I kind of joke. This is a few days before June 8th, and I kind of jokingly made a post saying, "Hey, this is the restaurant where Tony Bourdain almost breathed his last."
Yeah, exactly.
And I was like, I didn't realize how dark that was. So the whole trip, it was like he was there.
Yeah.
I'm trying to follow his example, and we got back to Hamilton.
Yeah.
The night of June 7th, and I was thinking, this is a great trip. I got to catch up. I didn't even think anything of it.
Sure.
And the morning I woke up, and as is my custom, I had my phone next to me. So I was still in bed, and the only headline that anyone's talking about was Anthony Bourdain dead. And I remember I was half asleep. I saw it. I just kind of like, fuck. And I put the phone back. I went back to sleep. I was like, I'm not ready to deal with this yet.
Right.
And it was that kind of moment where the common sentiment was that I feel like I've known you forever, but I've never met you. Right? I think there's actually a little girl in one of the episodes that said that to him, right?
Right.
And that's basically true of a lot of us who are in that kind of fandom, right? That otaku for Bourdain. It's like...
Totally.
So he was always like this kind of quasi-friend / uncle / right? Like big brother figure.
Yeah.
Who who's always somewhere. I had a separate group of friends who always had this guy named Matt with them, right? They were all high school people. They went to school here.
Okay.
They were the ones who stuck around, but this guy Matt apparently got all these things. So like a big thing whenever they'd have a little dinner reunion was be like, where's Matt today? Oh, he's in England. Oh, he's in Japan. Oh, he's this. Tony was like that for me. I was like, there's this guy who I know. Wonder where he is right now. I know he's out there somewhere walking the world.
Big time.
And that's when it hit me in little stages. And it's strange. Another sentiment is that people have said, I never felt this way about a celebrity death.
Yeah.
And over the course of time, like that night at Dunas Verdes, having that meal was one of those most, oh yeah. And then trying to go to the restaurant next door. I was like, I'm going to frequent. I got to get to know my own community.
Yeah.
Because that was the other thing he was big on. You didn't have to go halfway around the world to find a great meal and to find great people, right?
For sure.
And to have those in-depth conversations.
Totally.
I still work as a ghostwriter, a book ghostwriter.
Yep.
As a freelancer.
Right.
And I found that I had been unconsciously mimicking his space holding style.
I see.
Because even though like we have a production value here, you have the equipment, you have all this, but we're having a real conversation.
Exactly.
Now you're very good at holding the space. You're doing that very wonderfully. Right?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, and I think maybe we're channeling a bit of Tony right in this moment.
Absolutely.
But this is it. Like the power in any conversation is with the listener, not the speaker.
Totally.
And Tony was a great listener. How much of it? I suspect this was genuine. He said that when people start recognizing, when they started recognizing him more, and then flagging him down in the middle of the streets to shake his hand or say something, right? Chef Dave Chang had actually pointed out that he said he never saw Tony get impatient with anybody, lose their temper, right? Lose his temper. And he asked them about that. I was like, how do you deal with that? And he said, me being gracious with somebody is as a consequence of me doing the work that I'm doing here, it's far preferable than being on the line in the kitchen.
Sure.
At his age.
No kidding.
That's the option. And that's not to say it wasn't genuine.
Sure.
But Bourdain was, as we found out later, is actually an introvert.
Right.
Which means that must have been a fucking nightmare for him at times.
Oh my gosh. I couldn't.
Yeah. So sort of bringing that back, right? I found that all these different things Tony had been in my life. And so that's why the following year, going back into my buddy's wedding in Cartagena, I was like you. I was watching the Food Network a lot.
Sure.
Giotto's show was on.
Yeah.
Jose Andres did have a show thing. I think he was on PBS at the time. I'm consuming cooking show content like it was nobody's business.
100%. Yeah.
This is just my jam.
Yeah.
And suddenly, I was flipping channels. I see Travel Channel, and I just kind of leave it on. And it was the Cartagena episode.
No way.
And I don't know. I don't remember the exact moment, but it must have been like when they logged in. I was like, "No reservations. Who is this guy?" Right? And they're panning around. This is what it was actually. Now I remembered. We had another friend who had met a Colombian woman in Bogota.
Okay.
And they had recently gotten married.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, this is like 2007-ish, I think, 2006. They got married before we did.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, Colombia. Let's find out about Colombia, right? And the first line in the show, I'm expecting a travel brochure, right?
Right.
He says the first line was like, Cartagena, Colombia, the very upscale Boca Grande district, no doubt paid for by your 1980s excesses. You know who you are. I was like, shit, did he just say that?
Yeah.
And then later on in the episode, he talks about like they went to a street stand where they served like he's like the business end of lower intestine of the pig. It's like, wow, poop shoot never tasted so good or something like that. Yeah. I was like, did he just say poop shoot on TV? Like, what the fuck? And then they're bleeping out his shit, right? Like, of course. Like all of his cursing. I'm like, who is this guy?
Yeah,
that's like, exactly. I like him. And so that was the first episode, was in Cartagena. So cool. The following year after he's died, when I get that opportunity to go, I go.
100%.
And I didn't speak my Spanish was un poquito, right? Okay. No es bueno.
Just a little bit?
Yeah.
Okay.
No es bueno.
No good.
Mi español no es bueno.
That's not good.
No.
Okay.
And so I had to rely on my friends who were fluent, right? Who were going to meet, right? It's a wedding party. Super also, cool. You're going with a group who's with a wedding, so you do not want to be the problem.
Of course. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like, don't be the reason why everything goes off the rails.
Right.
So I played it very conservatively as much as I could.
Okay.
But we eventually there's like the local market. Tony always said, when you're visiting a place, go to the market.
Yeah.
I was like, this market is kind of off course. It's way outside the Boca Grande. Okay. If you're on foot. And you need to rely on a cabbie or something like that. So I need a fluent speaker with me. But on the day of the wedding, we made it happen. I said one of my friends' relatives showed up. She was doing relief working in Colombia already.
Cool.
We got in the cab. We went to the market and did spin. I found the place where he was eating the food.
No way.
I did. It's like that market was like, it was a mess. They actually, I think they may have demolished it since and reconstituted somewhere else so they could clean up the area.
Right.
But it was a true Colombian wet market. All the fruits were there, all the food and everything like that. Sat with a lady, paid something like $4 for this amazing meal, possibly ate turtle.
Oh yeah?
I don't know what was in it.
Oh jeez. What was the dish?
It was close to what he ate. It was the restaurant that serves the people who work in the market.
Okay.
So they will have a lot of local specialties. It was something involving rice. Excuse me. Something involving rice, chicken.
Yeah.
the reptile, which is possibly, it was turtle eggs. That's what it was. Turtle eggs.
Okay.
So I did have that.
Okay.
Sorry. I hope that wasn't endangered or anything. But like these are the things, right? But this is the experience.
Anthony wouldn't have cared.
Yeah, and I got to sit and with my translator, you know, had a quick conversation with the lady. She's been there for 20 years, and right. She said, I asked, did do you get a lot of Westerners coming in or visitors because of Anthony Bourdain? She said, we should have a couple, right?
Right.
But it's like, had a genuine, brief conversation because we had to rush off because the wedding ceremony was that night.
Oh, wow.
But that was the experience. And that was great. I got to live that.
So cool.
You know?
And that whole, like, again, doing the way he did it. And it's funny when we were talking about, you know, finding a place that has as many people as you possibly can find. If there's a lineup, all the better.
Yeah.
You know, I was reading Kitchen Confidential's his first book, right?
It's the book. It's not his first book.
No.
It's the book that got him the fame and fortune that he
First
won.
one was like an actual novel, right?
I think he wrote a crime. No, the Bone in the Throat came afterward. He'd written a couple of novels before that,
Right.
and they never quite took off.
But his first big one was Kitchen
It was
Confidential.
Kitchen
right?
Confidential. That was the one that put him on the map.
And one of his rules was, if the bathroom's dirty, don't eat there.
Yeah.
But he recanted on that later in life. I remember listening to that, saying, you know, he's eaten at some of the dirtiest places in the world and had amazing food, right? So again, these are the things where it's like, you can't be afraid. And if the local people are eating there, that's the most important thing, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, going to these markets and that's where, you know, you'll find other chefs. That's where you're going to find, again, the people who are interested in that food too, right? And the example that Anthony kind of like put out for everyone is an amazing one to follow when you're traveling, because it just puts you in that mindset of being like, again, avoid the McDonald's, avoid like the places that look like, oh, they have American food or whatever they say, you know what I mean? And if it's empty, it's probably empty for a reason, like you said, and if it's full for a reason. Yeah. And it's not because they're poisoning people, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I
never have the Western breakfast at an Asian hotel.
Yeah.
It's like, you could be staying at like the Four Seasons Beijing or something like that, or Tokyo. It's like, don't have the Western breakfast.
Right.
Go have what the locals are having.
Yeah. Which is probably like some type of savory breakfast kind of thing that we might not be used to. But again, that's the thing, is that it's actually funny. I've been following this. I guess she would be a nutritionist on Instagram, but she's talking about like glucose levels and things like that.
You found a nutritionist on Instagram?
Imagine. Wow. Imagine.
Oh my gosh, man. That's incredible. You hit what a find.
They're rarely on there.
I know.
I don't know if she's just like, that's what I mean. She's talks about nutrition. So whether she's a trained nutritionist or not, she has a book. Again, that's not necessarily a credential, but she talks about like glucose spikes in your eating, and that you shouldn't eat necessarily a sweet breakfast first, because it spikes your glucose in a way that like a savory wouldn't. So it's really interesting, because she actually will show you, like, a big part of her actual Instagram is she shows you like food combinations that actually reduce your body's like glucose spikes. So like cantaloupe and prosciutto. Yeah. Actually, if you just ate cantaloupe, your glucose level goes crazy. With the prosciutto, it kind of almost flattens off. So it's like, it's interesting. Some of those traditional food pairings, they're actually healthier for you in a way. Yeah. And then if you took the constituents apart, your body deals with it differently. Again, that's what's fascinating about food to me too. There's so many ways you can look at it, right? Like I was a big fan of Alton Brown. Alton Brown, right? Yeah. From Good Eats. Yeah. Because he was like a scientist with it. Yeah. Right? You know, he would tell you, and he would draw molecules and shit, and like it was all about what like the science of cooking. Like what heat and surface area, and like, again, like the physics essentially of cooking, where some other chefs would be much more artistry involved and feel, and who cares what temperature, and not like measuring shit and all that stuff too, right? Yeah. And then the actual, like, once you eat it is fascinating too. Like what your body does with it, and like how you digest it, and like different parts. Like I had a really, really good biology teacher in high school. I went all over this stuff in university too, but my biology teacher was like the first to really lay out like what the digestive system is. Shout out Mr. Netterveen. He did a really, really good job of like, I don't know how he did this. I don't know if this was his thing, but he basically had the digestive system as like a machine. He like just like recreated it, kind of like drew this picture with like a funnel at the beginning and then like a exit at the end. But it's like your entire digestive system, because your digestive system is weird. It's not really a part of your body. in a way, right? There's an opening at each end. It's kind of like a tube that runs through the middle of you.
Yeah.
And in fact, no part of your like inner parts interact directly through it, other than like blood barriers, right? Yeah. So it's an interesting interaction with your body. And then you have like weird
the gut bacteria, the microbiome, right? The forest, like our own kind of flora, right?
And that's essentially how we develop in the womb, is we kind of like,
we start with the ass first.
Essentially.
That's I read that. Yeah.
And that's what they mean, because your digestive system kind of is the first part that and then you grow around it. Yeah. Which is super interesting, right? And that gut flora, and people have like candida, like different gut flora, and different. It's not just candida, but there's other ones where different gut flora will become overactive, and then it like actually affects your mood and your like decisions.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Because 70% of your body's serotonin is made in the gut.
Yeah.
So
wow,
which is a lot.
Yeah.
And if your gut is messed up, like. That's why they said, I don't know who said this, but there's like 3 brains, right? Like there's your actual brain, your heart, and your gut.
And your gut, yeah.
And there's some physiological backing to that, because there's efferent and afferent neurons, right? There's neurons that go from your brain out, and then there's neurons that go from your body back to your brain.
Yeah.
There's more, and those are, the afferent go out and the efferent come back, I think, if I remember. And there's more efferent coming from the heart going to the brain than there is from the brain to the heart. So there's something in the heart telling the brain more stuff than the brain is telling the heart.
Oh yeah.
Which is super interesting. And a lot of cultures, the heart is special. I know in Christianity, the Sacred Heart and the Immaculate Heart, all that stuff, right? And again, it's just kind of like your center.
Yeah.
And then there's like the gut, which is like an intuition kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right? Where
it's not a coincidence we use these words to describe those experiences.
Big time. Or like someone has a lot of guts.
Yeah.
Right? And they're brave, and it's something like, that's an interesting one, right? Where it's like, again, you have that, if and people are yellow bellied, if they're not brave, right? Like it's interesting.
It's interesting you bring this up, because like, again, relate this back to Bourdain and cooking generally, right? I've been getting very well versed in homemade bone broths.
Unreal.
Yeah. And making that out of beef and stuff to feed the gut flora, and as well as having kefir, right?
Yes.
Now, these 2 things alone, if you would, this is related to the openness that, guys like Bourdain basically encourage, right?
Sure.
If you had told me, if anyone else, because again, nutritionists on Instagram, wow.
Yeah.
If anyone else had told me, I was like, dude, you got to have some more bone broth. You should have some kefir. You should have some yogurt. You should do all these, these healthy things. Most people, I would just be like, oh man, this is some health food scam. It's like something like that, right? It's not going to work. It's just, you're making money off me. I would never try it. Because of the openness that I have to food, largely thanks to guys like Anthony Bourdain.
Yeah.
I want to go back in the kitchen now and actually go through the trouble of, just like roasting the bones and salting them and getting the apple cider vinegar and throwing them in a slow cooker with some different spices and boiling them down, right?
Nice.
Like this is the gateway to try new things, right? And I mean, I think it's another Instagram account called Arcade Bullshit.
Okay.
He talked about bone broth made of skeletons. I'm drinking the bones of my enemies, which is a lot sexier than saying I'm eating soup.
Right.
Things like that. Yeah. And you're getting all that, right? And the idea of trying something that sounds exotic to this Western brain, like kefir.
Sure.
It contributes to overall health, right? And again, you have to have that openness. These cultures that he's talked to, like a lot of the time, he's gone to different places where they're eating these things, and if you're sitting there at home in your nice suburban area, and I'm not knocking the fast food thing. I mean, I had fast food today.
Sure.
Right. Like I eat everything. I love food.
Yeah.
But like, if you're stuck in that little suburban subdivision sprawl thing where like you think everyone looks the same, everyone eats the same, everyone does that, right? You're less inclined to see the value of different foods. And some of these places, like he went to Okinawa. Okinawa has some of the biggest collection of centenarians, because their food is basically leafy greens.
Tremendous.
But it's prepared in a way that's delicious.
Right.
You want to eat this stuff.
Totally.
Right? And like, how else are you supposed to know?
Yeah.
And yeah, there's a whole rabbit hole like we can go into about the heart and the brain, all that other stuff. But yeah, but you're right. Feeding your gut, what you eat, how you prepare it matters.
Big time. it's interesting. I mean, I think, it's our the way we've grown up and where we are and our family and our ancestry, that has a lot to do with it too. And I heard one thing was, there's this tip where it was like, eat what your grandparents ate.
Yeah.
Because that's probably somewhere in you. And like I always say, like I could, if I was really like, not that I'm super careful with my diet, do not get me wrong.
Yeah.
But if I just completely went off the rails, said nothing matters anymore, I could easily get to 400 pounds, like no problem. Mm-hmm. And don't get me wrong, I'm over 300 right now,
right.
But like I could get huge.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure that comes from, because my grandparents came from like Poland, Lithuania during World War II.
Yeah. Not
a lot of food. They were more or less malnourished people. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then they come to North America where all this food is available. My parents weren't so much, they could almost eat anything.
Yeah.
But now they got to me, and it's like my genes are almost like, hey, whatever you get, you got to hold on to it, because someday you might not have it.
Yeah.
Right? Where, and I always feel like the most, I mean, I love Italian food, probably like one of my favorite like genres of food, if you will. But like if I eat like just like meat and potato kind of thing, I'm like good. Like there's something that tells me, like my body's like, yeah, right on. Where if I eat like super healthy and like just a bunch of salads, I feel like I have to eat 10 salads and I have to eat all, you know what I mean? Like to feel that same.
And maybe that's what your body wants. Yeah. I cut across here. Sorry.
No, yeah.
No, maybe that's what your body actually wants. Not necessarily a McDonald's hamburger.
Sure.
But it wants some beef. It wants some fat, right? It wants
Big time.
It wants the umami. It wants all that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. There's a whole sub-philosophy of this whole food nutrition thing where they say eat what you're craving.
Sure.
Which can
be
dangerous
game, my
friend.
It's
a dangerous game, depending on who you are,
right.
Especially if sugar's involved. Although
Big time.
One of these nutritionists once suggested that when your body's... No background in nutrition, by the way, I should clarify. No credentials. I'm just regurgitating what I heard from somewhere else.
Our audience is used to that.
Okay, awesome. This idea that whenever you're craving sugar, what you're actually craving is protein. That if you were to get protein, your sugar craving goes away.
Right.
And I've tried this out for myself. This mixed results at times.
Sure.
The sleep is another factor.
Right.
If you're not sleeping, and I actually wonder sometimes if this contributed to Bourdain's stuff, because if he's flying and traveling all over the world all the time, his sleep cycle's fucked.
Brutal.
Right. So where does that put your mental state?
Sure.
Right. And so like sleep affects whether you have sugar cravings and all these other things. And no, the ancestry thing, it's funny you mentioned that too. So right now, in addition to working in service, which I want to talk about, like how Bourdain opened up me wanting to work in the service industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll circle back to that in a second, but like I'm lately developing ostensibly a coaching service. I'm a big personal development guy.
Cool.
But I also realize that personal development is toxic in a lot of ways. And so I'm trying to find a way that works.
Okay.
So I've been getting into a sort of a natural, nature-based personal depth approach that involves things like your ancestry.
Right.
And you'd mentioned Lithuania, Eastern Europe, right?
Yep.
And given that history, that epigenetic history,
your
ancestors probably had, even before the war, had lots of famines going on because of either the communist system kind of fucking things up at times.
Big time.
Droughts.
Yep.
All these other things.
Yep.
My ancestry that I ran to trace, I was born in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yep.
And then prior to that, my Indian ancestors came from northern India, Uttar Pradesh, in that area. So the foothills of the Himalayas, I like to say, right?
Cool.
So we're all kind of, in the research I've been doing in terms of things like ancestry, into this whole, almost like the mythopoetic way of looking at it.
Totally.
Which has some tie-ins to genetics, but it's very land-based, right? It's almost indigenous, right?
Yeah.
It's there's a point that your DNA had in its history, the DNA that we're both carrying right now, where there was one place, one climate, one type of food, like one environment that it's used to, that you could reasonably say you're from.
Right.
In a way that indigenous peoples can say, like in all around the world, especially around here, right? The Haudenosaunee can say, this is where my ancestors were, like, have been for thousands of years.
Exactly.
Your ancestors probably in one place for thousands of years, right?
Yeah.
What was the nature of that place? Well, it could be that if we're both bigger guys, right?
Yeah.
Maybe in a place where there's drought.
Yeah.
or where you can't grow or you're constantly getting conquered,
Yeah.
maybe your body just learned to pack on a few extra pounds just in case.
Big time.
And that has relevance. That actually gives me a peculiar sense of place in the world, despite all the craziness everywhere.
Yeah.
Knowing that this body may have been, all this time growing up in North America where there's so much food, being skinny is the social value. It's the thing that makes you attractive, or being buff.
Right.
And it's like, that's when times are good. When times are bad, though, that the vegan jogger running down my street, my gentrified street, is not going to live long.
No, exactly. Well, look back in the day, all the kings were big, and the serfs and the peasants were like super skinny, like malnourished, right?
Yeah.
Like, again, it's interesting how that, and like, you mentioned even, what are the things that we crave, that umami flavor, those certain flavors, fat and salt are the hardest things to get in nature.
Yeah.
Right? Like up until obviously very recently, we've been able to, like, for the millions of years that, like, whatever our species has been around, it was very hard to get salt.
Yeah.
Very recently we've been able to mine it, and then fat obviously again is hard to find, because like even if you go and like shoot a deer now, there's like almost no fat in it.
Yeah.
Like it's very lean.
Yeah.
A lot of those game meats, right?
When Tony went to the Ozarks,
Yeah.
did you remember that episode?
Yes,
right?
yeah.
They had squirrel pie.
Right.
Now, as we're recording this, we're a few months away from what people are predicting to be a spike in the food prices. Mm-hmm. So this has become, in recent weeks, the single best excuse I've had for not going on a fucking diet. I'm going to tell you that right now.
Unreal.
Right? Because it's totally reasonable, I think, at this point.
Right.
Let's
be forced to in a bit.
That quote from Corinthians, let us eat and let us drink, for tomorrow we die, may happen.
There it is.
And I want to be clear too. I'm speaking from an incredible level of privilege. I'm not rich, but I have many more privileges than many of the folks who are homeless or are displaced or refugees right now. So I want to kind of check myself, right?
Yep.
And make sure I'm in my lane.
Amen.
Within that lane, though. Mm-hmm. I'm just letting the good times roll at this point, because I'm going to get a physical soon to get a checkup, and because it's been a couple of years because, pandemic.
Right.
I want to see how I'm doing, but as of right now, I don't feel strange. I think it might be okay to kind of just eat my fill.
Sure.
And then maybe a little bit more.
Right.
Because who knows the availability and diversity of food. Now, this also has me researching things like eating locally. Mm-hmm. And I thought, and you get that dark kind of undertone. It's like, well, geez, are we going to end up forming militias or something? Is things going to break down? What's going to happen, right? Because wealthy people, the country, the two revolutions I think of the most are the French Revolution and the Russian Revolution, where people who are used to having food, who when they don't get it, that's when they're going to coalesce around one particular set of groups who will basically destroy everything, right?
Yeah.
Let them eat cake and all that stuff.
Right.
Or the Russians, where like people are starving because they're trying to feed the war effort, like in World War I, etc. The Bolsheviks move in, etc. And we've seen the freedom convoy stuff happening here. We've seen just like all these things kind of coalescing, convalescing, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, I wonder what's going to happen when the food. That was just in response to the inconvenience of certain lockdowns, not necessarily things that was threatening one of Maslow's fundamental needs.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm really concerned about the fall, but it's summertime now, so I'm going to let it ride.
Right.
And so I'm looking around, kind of preparing for it. I'm like, what can we eat if I couldn't get anything? Well, once my freezer runs out, once my flour and all this other stuff runs out, once my canned goods runs out, we do seem to have a lot of squirrels around here, and they're pretty plump.
They sure are.
We got raccoons.
Yeah, man.
And I'm also learning how to identify like plants and stuff. But but sometimes, when you have a crazy idea, and you need that validation from someone who did it, right? Sure. I just happened to watch the Ozarks episode, and I was like, all right, Tony did it. And it sounds kind of juvenile. It almost sounds very, very juvenile to say that. But again, because Tony is is in my mind a trusted authority on trying different things and showing me that it's okay. Mm-hmm. I mean, seeing that kind of reinforces, okay, well, we're worried about scarcity, But if you know where to look, we are surrounded by abundance.
Oh, yeah.
Right. And so taking this kind of, as I'm building my coaching business and looking at this, the sort of the ideas of permaculture, which seem to fit a big gap, right?
Yeah.
Now I'm involved in groups around here where there are foragers. So I'm learning to identify, like, for example, we have this very invasive plant in Hamilton called garlic mustard.
Okay.
Have you seen this thing?
I've probably seen it.
You've probably seen it. It's everywhere, right?
Okay.
And the garlic mustard is edible. It's an invasive species, which started like many other invasive species. Like somebody planted it for food, and it hopped their fence.
Sure.
And it's incredibly bad for native plants here because it takes all the nutrients out of the soil, doesn't really give a lot back, and it spreads like crazy. The seed pods are very easily distributed.
Interesting. Okay.
And they don't need much, right?
Okay.
So my thought is like, can we go on a garlic mustard harvest, right? Because it's food. Dandelion started out as an edible thing, crop that was brought over from Europe.
Big
that
time.
Just,
Lots of Italians make dandelion wine to this day that I know.
Yeah, and since the 50s, we consider it just a weed and a pest. It's like, you have food.
Yeah.
Growing on your green lawn, you can have salad, right?
Big time.
It's the bitterness of it is good for your stomach, right?
Sure.
Very nutritious stuff. So now I'm learning to identify, and if you ask me today to go outside right now and point it out, I can't. I'm learning, right?
Sure.
I have a plant app on my phone.
Oh, cool.
But my
point, do those work? Those plant apps? Ish? It's tough, I'm sure.
Like, yeah.
You gotta get the right picture?
Yeah, there's no substitute in this case for like having a book and with a picture on it, right?
Yeah, I hear you.
Now, YouTube is a great resource too to learn about this stuff. So that's my rabbit hole. It's like when I'm not watching the new Marvel show or something like that, or The Boys, I'm watching like these things, right? And so like this is all part of it, right?
Right.
And it's a shift in the perspective where like we're thinking about scarcity. You are surrounded by food. You just need to know to identify it as food.
Have you ever heard of Steve Rinella?
No, I haven't.
It's funny, I was just thinking about this now. He's kind of like the Hunter Anthony Bourdain. I don't want to put him up on such a high pedestal, but he's a writer. He's got a really great way of speaking and has a few books out there, but he has a podcast called Meat Eater. Yeah. And I think he has a show called Meat Eater.
I think he does. I think I've heard of the show now. Yeah.
So, and he takes people out and does all kinds of stuff, but like, he'll teach how to like prepare a squirrel and like do all kinds of like, anything that's in the woods, he's all about, and there's lots of hunting advocacy and all stuff. But again, it just made me think of that, where it's like, having someone say, yeah, this is something that people prepare. This is how you can do it. Yeah. Right. It just gives you that you just seeing it, right? Because that's how humans are, right? We're very perceptual. We have these mirror neurons that when we see someone do something, there is an effect on our brain that it's like we're actually experiencing it. So seeing these people and watching these things, and I feel like we've gotten away from certain shows like that where they're taking you to these new places and being like, this is, instead of it's moved to a new shifting, like kind of like, I'm here now, watch me here, instead of like focusing on the actual destination. And that's something that it's starting to revert a little bit, because that's how it used to be, right? Sure. There's like before Bourdain, right? That was it. Like it was me in this place. Yeah. And even near the end, it was in the Kenya episode, and this actually recently ended up in my Instagram account, right? It was like, he's like, this isn't my story. This is Kenya's story. Yes. But I'm behind the camera. Who's going to tell their stories? Who's coming up next? And he left that as an open question. And given that ended up being the last episode of Parts Unknown that he narrated, right, in post before his death, it became like a very haunting thing, right? And in a way, people have interpreted that as like, is he passing the torch? Is he, what is he encouraging? And my take on that was like, yes, we should be telling more people's stories, right? We should be focusing outward that way. Yeah. But before he came along, there was like this documentary thing. The travel shows were kind of boring, and suddenly now every chef, like Dave Chang is his friend of his, right? Like, and I love Dave Chang. Every chef's got some problematic stuff, but I like that I love his series Ugly Delicious, which involved him going to these places and actually trying it, and then sending other chefs to go and right to see where the food comes from and to tell those stories. And he adds a social justice element that's more overt, I think, than what Tony was doing, right? And in some areas, for sure. And that's the legacy. That's what you're carrying on. Is like, this is the story that you got to tell the stories of the people who were there, and
like that's actually a really great thing. Now Gordon Ramsay, I love Gordon for different reasons.
Sure.
I don't hate on almost anybody, right?
Of course.
But like Gordon Ramsay, when he did his travel show, a lot of the episodes involved him suddenly going to these places and then showing them how to cook. And I thought that's not what Tony did.
Right.
But Gordon's doing his own thing.
Totally.
Right? And that's fair. It's just not the same, and I don't think it's as nearly as effective because it is very networky.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's more
time.
like it's TV. It's a template now.
For sure. And that whole look into that side of things, right? Like that's Gordon's approach is like he wants to experience, and it comes off as he's showing people because that's just who he kind of is.
Yeah.
But I feel like, again, and it's interesting, and kind of like, what about Anthony kind of got you into the service industry? You kind of mentioned that.
Yeah. So I had never thought about it. Mm-hmm. I was raised in that suburban mindset of like, get the immigrant mindset too, from Trinidad, middle class parents.
Yep.
Not university educated, who like, we're going to work these jobs so you can go to school, you can get a degree, and then get a job in some corporation, get all these other things. Right. A lot of my cousins did that.
Okay.
And move up, get a house, get the spouse, get the car, get the kids, do that whole thing. Essentially, what we're doing.
Sure.
And so, within that
American
context, with the North American dream, which is not working in a restaurant or a brewery in this case,
Sure.
right? 2 breweries,
Right.
in your 40s,
Right.
divorced and no children, right? These renting an apartment forever, like this is not the vision,
Right.
But in a way, like I would enjoy going to restaurants.
Yeah.
I love food again, like going back to that, and then suddenly Bourdain is like he simultaneously like led to a lot of people romanticizing it, as well as showing that maybe this isn't for me. Right, this is hard work,
Big time.
it's
Big
brutal, it's unforgiving. Mm-hmm. We saw during the pandemic, right? They're the first casualties, right?
Sure.
In terms of businesses, a lot of people didn't come back from that.
No.
Like right here in Hamilton, right? Especially, right? And then we're far from being unaffected by it.
Sure.
And these are places that you take for granted.
Yeah.
And the perverse thing has been, now that we're back open, we've gone right back to taking them for granted.
Of course.
But what had happened I was on government support.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely needed that. I would have been homeless in my car without it, right? So when that was about to run out, it's like, okay, well, the government said, okay, are you looking for work? It's like, I'm looking.
Yeah.
But the idea behind the programs is that you didn't have to be. There's no jobs, etc. So it was great. Now I'm actually a little nervous talking about this in case someone from CRA is listening. It's like, what? I don't think I did anything wrong.
No.
But I don't know, right? But that was about to run out, and I thought, okay, you know what? I got to get a job somewhere. So
Sure.
I went to 2 places. I went up to... Oh, yeah. We're not going to mention names.
Sure.
I went up to a certain farm that has a market up on the top of the hill
Okay, great.
to see if they had something. Maybe I could do some kitchen work or something like that. I thought, okay, I was open to this because of Tony. It's like, this is work I never tried before. It's okay. They didn't have anything. So I was like, okay. So then immediately I headed down because I remembered vaguely from Instagram that the brewery in town was having a job fair.
Very cool.
This is when people were complaining, oh, nobody wants to work because they're unserved, right? Like, I was like, whatever, right?
Sure.
So I walk in, talk to, right?
Yeah.
And I basically had the job.
Unreal.
So I thought, okay, this is great. So I'm front of house
Cool.
serving beer.
Yeah.
And the first shift, I actually wanted to quit at the end.
Oh, no.
Because I didn't anticipate how hard it was. And that's not even the back of house stuff. Everyone here who works in a kitchen knows, like, the front of house, oh, yeah, I guess that's so easy. It's like, nah, man, that shit was hard. I'd never changed a keg before. I never had to do this. I never had to clean. I was like, my millennial entitlement, such as it was, middle-class millennial entitlement of like, I don't need to clean toilets. What am I? It's like, what am I doing here, right?
Right.
So I lost my shit that night. I was like, I don't know if I'm going to come back. And then I thought, well, you know what? Let me give it another shot.
Yeah.
I'm glad I did. Happily, one of the best jobs I've had. It led me to the other place, which is also one of the best jobs I've had. Like, it's a great industry. You meet so many people.
Totally.
As of this recording, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez did a recent Instagram story that she saved. Yeah. Where someone, she does great things, right? I'm on that side of the spectrum. I love what she does. And so
Absolutely.
she says, she said that like somebody asked her during an Ask Me Anything, she's like, any advice for getting out of the service industry? And then it led to this little rabbit hole of like the superpowers you get being a bartender, being a server, even like being a cook, right? Having to negotiate with that. Now that chefs are and the kitchens have been given sort of a rightful, I would hope, a more respectful kind of place.
I think so.
In the public, I think so.
I think
right?
so.
Right? Like these things teach you all these skills that people working in office, talking to the same people every day, using the corporatese language all the time, right? They never do that. So like I'm introverted. I'm obviously, I had done a lot of this personal growth work, as I mentioned, which led me to being able to create and generate this kind of outgoingness. But
Sure.
make no mistake, there's a fuel tank that is like an afterburner in a jet plane. It's like it's starting to diminish, right?
Yeah.
The more I do it.
Right.
And it does every shift. It's the same thing. By the end of the night, I don't want to talk to anybody.
Sure.
Right?
Oh yeah. No, I hear you.
But now I've seen it. I've met people. I can engage in more meaningful conversations. I can
100%.
My facial ability to remember faces and names is improving, which is something I've always struggled with.
Oh, that's great.
It's not perfect, but it's getting there now,
100%.
right? You get to know people's names and you remember, oh yeah, how was the wedding last week, or
Big
like
time.
how'd that meeting go, and
Yeah.
it most importantly facilitates connection in a place where you're coming here for that. This is one of the reasons we stay alive. This is one of the reasons why we make all that money. We work so hard during the rest of the week in the non-service jobs.
Yep.
Because we want to have these experiences. And I don't think I would have been as open to the idea of getting a job in a brewery if it wasn't for Anthony Bourdain.
Wow.
All those years of just the sum total of that, the other stories that he led me to in chefs and series is right.
Sure.
If it wasn't for that,
Right.
right?
Well, I think that's the great thing about, you do get to see, it's dynamic, right? You get to see so many new people, you get to see new faces, and yes, there are some really terrible times where someone's coming in and someone's being rude or whatever. It's a shame that we have that in North America where, even this like server's wage thing, that whole thing, tip based, like when I was in Europe, it was like, or at least in Portugal and other places, it was like, no, like tipping is not a thing.
Yeah.
Like unless the service was outstanding, it's not included.
Yeah.
The servers weren't like, oh, this is my section, like don't go near there. They all just helped out each other. Like it wasn't like, it was really like open. And again, I didn't feel, because I think sadly, at least in Canada, and I'm sure it's the same thing in the States too.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's like this idea like server is really close to servant. And people kind of push that line so hard. Yeah. And it's really a shame because this whole idea of like, oh, you have to work for your tip.
Yeah.
Where you're already doing a service. Like someone has to bring you the food. Someone has to give you the beer. Yeah. Like unless you're going back there and doing it yourself, someone has to do it. So why are we treating them like they're less than?
Because historically it was slaves who was doing that.
True.
You think back to the Roman times, right? Like
you're right.
Like that's what it was. And so like we inherited it. This ties back to ancestry too.
Absolutely.
Like you got to know the deep roots of your history, and then when you do that, you realize that like empire as a concept,
sure,
and as a practice emerges, and one of the first things it does is completely demolishes that indigenous kind of sense of equality. Mm-hmm. That sense of like everyone, yes, I may be a hunter, but like I'm just because I'm providing the meat doesn't mean I get more of it, right? Like I'm the elderly and the young and the sick, right?
Totally.
We take care of everybody.
Yeah.
It takes out the empire, the imperial thing takes that out, and the Romans in particular were brutal with it,
right?
Because they would conquer you, then say, look, we can either kill you now or you can sign up with us. You can be a Roman citizen. Mm-hmm. We're going to move you to somewhere else in the empire, and you're going to raise your kids there. They're going to get automatic Roman citizenship. So then they've never been to Rome, but then what you've done is you've severed them from your ancestral lands, from the graves of your ancestors, from the shrines, right? Mm-hmm. The lands that you've known. So then you have no roots. And then the Romans go and conquer England.
Right.
And then England gets conquered again and again by other Romanized peoples, right? Sure. I'm assuming.
Yeah.
No expert, right?
Right.
And then the British become what? The big empire.
Right.
And they go and conquer everybody else. And who are the first people that they knock off? Is other indigenous peoples in North America, in India, in Africa, right? And then this little experiment in America like suddenly starts up, and they become their own thing. And what do? They move west and knock off the rest of them.
Totally.
Right? So now you have this kind of rootlessness to it.
Yeah.
And then you forget your history, but you carry with it many institutions, including food service and food preparation for the public in a restaurant.
Sure.
Like restaurants may not have existed in the Roman days as by that name, but they're public places you would go to eat.
Right.
And it was always slaves doing that. So when you have Romanized Western modern culture, it gets into the attitudes of people. They don't even know where it comes from.
Yeah.
And then when you go and look, it's like, okay, that makes sense.
It does.
Right? So that's where that is. And this is kind of a big tangent, but it's worth noting that it's no surprise to me that many people in the service industry who stay in the industry skew to that progressive side because they know what it's like to be, they're the underdogs.
Right.
And they get it, right? And this is where movements start, with people connecting like that. And as AOC kind of pointed out, like there's no better way to grow your EQ, right? And your empathy for other people than to serve them drinks and to bring out their food. For sure. And
it brings people together too. It's funny. I always used to say, not to continue on, not to even become more tangential, but offensive line on the football team. I played football at Western. A lot of big guys. We grew up big guys. Like not too many dudes were like little skinny kids and became offensive linemen. Some did, but most of us were, you know, grew up around food, a lot of food, and sports and athletes. There's a big nutrition aspect to that. In fact, I did within my degree, there was times in my classes we talked a lot about like eating disorders and things like that as well in sports with like weight, weight categories in certain like wrestling and rowing and things like that. Anyway, as offensive line, we were always together eating, and we were like the closest knit group on the team. And I really do believe it comes from that, because I think there's there's hormones and there's things that are released that calm you down when you're eating, right? Because there's fight or flight and rest and digest, right? And you're in that digestion mode. The people around you, you're going to be like, oh, these people are cool. Like we're eating together. He's not trying to take my food. Like we're good. Like everyone's happy, and that is a bonding experience, right? Yeah. And I think being a part of that in the serving aspect, you are a crucial part of that. And to experience that with so many different people on the same day, it can be overwhelming in a sense, but it's also, again, you take the good with the bad. There is amazing things you can experience with that, right? Just that feeling of community, feeling a part of that, right? And providing people with a service that they're happy with too, right? Yeah. And I think, again, service industry people, again, they are looked down upon in a way, but then Bourdain came and he was like this.
He elevated.
Big time.
Right? In a way that almost no one prior to him had done that. And the thing is, too, he was likable. Yeah. Like, there's people who, they'll point to Marco Pierre White as being the first, like, kind of rock star punk rock chef. But Marco Pierre White is not that likable in a lot of ways. He doesn't. Now, Bourdain said some shit, too. Right? Of course. Notably against vegans. Totally. Notably, right?
Well, he wrote that one book. It was all just like chirping other people, right? Which one was that one again?
I think it was was it the Nasty Bits, or was it
something like that?
Medium Raw?
Picture the cover, Medium Raw.
Medium Raw, yeah. And he actually then pointed out, like he used to chirp Rachel Ray. Right. Rachel Ray sent him a gift basket, and he's like, and he stopped chirping Rachel Ray. He said, "That's actually how easy I am," right? And to some degree, like there's been conversation since about how much of Bourdain was what we saw versus what he actually was like, and the persona of authenticity. It's kind of an oxymoron. The persona of authenticity, which in itself seems inauthentic, but the same way, like we're having this conversation right now. I'm feeling really relaxed in this moment, but authenticity is always incomplete when you're looking at it through this medium.
It's true,
right?
Yeah,
because like you don't see me when I'm pissed off, when I'm tired, when I'm hungry. Yeah, kind of hungry now because we're talking about food. Not gonna lie, I know, right? But you don't see all the dimensions of it, right? And the same thing with Tony. It's like you don't see him in his private moments. Apparently, the people who did said that he was just super quiet. Yeah, he's vibing. Right, exactly. Most of the time, right? Like he said, he had a conversation about sunsets over the desert in the Sahara, and he said there are times where he would have this impulse to be like to kind of gather someone around, and say, "Hey, look at this," right? But then his introversion kicked in. He's like, well, no, this is only for me. The camera's not on.
Right.
I'm not going to tell my crew this. I'm just going to sit and enjoy the sunset. And elevating the service industry, folks. It's like, do you know how many? Was it Chuck Palahniuk in Fight Club? He said like some of the most brilliant. I've known some of those brilliant men ever. They're pumping gases and waiting tables, right?
Yeah.
And these are the most brilliant men that have walked the earth. And this is, not just men or women, or just like across the gender spectrum. It's like, I've met such cool people who do interesting things, and they are compassionate.
Yep.
They're nice. Do they have they're eccentric in a way that I like?
Yeah.
I don't want a boring corporate conservative person, right? In my life, like too much, right?
Sure.
I want someone who's got like a really strange hobby,
right?
Who isn't tuned into the consumer capitalist system as much, right? Not to say that we all participate to some degree.
Sure.
But like, I want someone who's an outlier, and Hamilton, in this, making it local again. It's like, this town is full of them.
Yeah. And
I'm worried that it's increasingly not, because we're getting the condo thing, and the folks from Toronto coming in, right? There's I think it was a talk at South by Southwest or something like that, like at one conference where this guy from Seattle said that he hated everything because like Seattle's doing this whole crazy. He's like, he prefers Portland to Seattle because Seattle's always doing this crazy thing.
Yeah,
it's trying to impress Tokyo.
Oh wow.
Toronto's trying to impress New York all the time.
Big time, yeah.
And I love Toronto too for its own qualities, but
sure,
when the symbolism of them tearing down a place like Honest Ed's to build another condo. Nothing sacred there.
You're killing me.
So when we have Toronto folks coming here, and I say this as a Brampton person who came here, right? Sure. So I'm one of the invaders, right? If we're just going to be replicating the same stuff, we're going to lose that eccentricity.
Exactly.
Right? So you're always going to need like that underdog class to kind of keep it real. I don't know how sustainable that system is. Now we're on a big tangent. I'm going to try to lure it back. Mm-hmm. And we're going to see some big stuff happening in the next few months, right? Just with when everything catches up to us in terms of the price hikes and such.
Yeah, exactly.
But and this is one thing too that I know we're a bit over time, but I'm okay.
Oh gosh, no worries. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I have missed Tony's perspective since 2020. Like, I would have loved to have seen what he would have said about this, about lockdowns and masks and vaccine mandates and restaurant bailouts and
100%.
the war in Ukraine. That's a heartbreaking episode. Now you want to watch No Reservations. It's to watch that now, and he's in Kyiv and he's at Chernobyl and they're talking about the food and shit. This is part of the thing. The world that Tony Bourdain walked no longer exists.
It's true.
And so watching those shows can be tough sometimes.
It's true.
On the other hand, the world that anyone on TV, in syndicated TV, who has walked it, no longer exists by the time you get there. Case in point, he had a restaurant, going back to Cartagena, restaurant in the historic district, the Centro. It was a seafood restaurant. It was the first stop that he had in Colombia. You go there now, there's a lineup out the door of the place. The guy actually opened a second restaurant. We had to go eat there because we couldn't get into the first place. Whoa. There's a picture of Tony in front.
Cool.
Right? Like these are the things, right? He's been everywhere. Mm-hmm. He's like if I were an alien coming to Earth, and I'm visiting different places and I keep seeing this likeness of this one guy, I would assume he was some type of deity.
Yeah. For sure.
And that's kind of what's happened to him, right? And I think like
it's true.
The biographies like Tom Vitale and Lori Wooliver, where they've released it afterwards, like his good friends, right, have brought him justifiably down to earth, right? Because he was a guy. Yeah. That was the initial appeal in the first place, is that he's an ordinary dude.
Totally. Exactly. Coming, especially when we're saying from that, your Emeril Lagasse's and these guys that were, and again, there's other chefs, worldly chefs that there's so much pretense and there's so much arrogance behind the food and the chefs and again Tony brought that down and he brought that it became way more accessible in a way, right?
And like what's funny is the fact that he would always beat on Guy Fieri. Fieri, it's like I like Guy Fieri, like because the guy the Flavortown thing, man, I get the Flavortown moments.
Yeah, man.
I get 100%. Something new. I get it at a nice restaurant. I have a dish. I'm just like, oh, fuck, It's so good, right?
Exactly.
It's like, I get that. I get guys' enthusiasm. But he's another ordinary guy. Is some of it persona? Of course, right?
Of course.
But like, this is just it. Like, ordinary people can see themselves in him, which means that you can then have that, right? And the thing that gets me now, I'm 41 years old. Gonna be 42 in October. Tony didn't get it, and Tony's first thing was being a writer. My first thing was being a writer.
Cool.
I'm still writing. Oh, too close to the mic. I'm still writing.
Yeah.
My own work, fiction, all this other stuff, right? If tomorrow somebody picked up one of my books and I'm sitting across from Oprah, and I think something like when Oprah, apparently every minute that Oprah's talking about your book, you're selling 200 copies of it a minute.
Oh my God.
Right?
Unreal.
Or something like that.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Or 2000, whatever it is, right?
Right.
If that's happening and I'm set for life, right, I will be happy. Now, like, that gives me kind of hope.
Sure.
That Tony, who had this happen to him at 43, having written books that didn't go anywhere prior to this, getting up every day, already starting to feel it in his bones, right? Like, I can't be on the line forever.
Sure.
Right? Duncan, he described it. He's working at a nice French restaurant at Leal. He's described as just I was dunking fries at 43. Next thing you know, I'm in the Sahara. It's like, no, you weren't just doing that. You were running the kitchen.
Yeah.
Like, that gives me some kind of hope that I won't, as much as I love the craft brewing industry here in town. I love these places. I don't want to be here forever.
Sure. Exactly.
My employers are, my bosses know this.
Sure.
They don't. I'm sure they don't expect that of me. It's the industry.
Yeah. Exactly.
But like, I'm not on the trajectory that I thought I would be in my 30s. Certainly not in my 20s. Both, but this is where I'm at. So maybe something will turn around. So Tony becomes sort of if it happened to him, right?
For sure.
I mean, I'm good with my rent. He said he never made his rent for like years.
Right.
I'm decent with my debt payments. It's
Exactly.
like I managed to stay. I think I'm a bit more functional than Tony was.
Sure.
In terms of those responsibilities, right? But it's like, so I have some advantages, but like, I want my big break, and I see it happening to him. It could happen to me too.
Exactly.
Right.
And that's the thing, is being in it. And it's funny with the service industry. You mentioned it before. There's almost everyone who works in the industry is also doing something else.
Yeah.
Because it allows you the
flexibility,
the flexibility, the hours being different, all that. Like, it
Yeah.
allows you to do other things and actually go after your passions and anything like that. And again, if you are someone who wants to be a lifelong server, work in the industry forever, work your way up, become a front of house, hostess, general manager, own the place, great.
Yeah.
That's amazing too. And the experience is invaluable.
Yeah.
But again, the flexibility of it does allow you to do what you want.
Yeah.
And then go do, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's how we do it. It's become somewhat of a theme on this podcast that you're only doing something if you're doing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Have you seen the night I forget what it was, the taste, or not the taste, it was I can't think of the name now. Hopefully you could find it afterwards, but there's this video where Vice.
Yeah.
Have you seen the Vice video of Tony having a night out with his crew?
No.
Okay.
I got to check that out.
Yeah. So this is basically when he was at the no reservation stage.
Okay, wicked.
So they're meeting him at the 0.0 offices. So you see Helen Cho, you see Tom Vitale, you see Zach Zamboni, right? Like the crew that we've come to know, and it's a weird kind of celebrity projection thing. It's like we feel like we know them too, which we don't.
Yeah, I know.
So it's like they were just basically having a night out on the town, summer night in Manhattan, right?
Cool.
So they go to these different places, these different stops. The thing that I loved the most was the very end. Tony says, "I'm going to cook a meal for you guys." So they go to Leal.
No way.
And there was this feeling like the captain's going back to the ship.
Wow.
Like Picard has gone back to the Enterprise type of thing, right?
Right.
And so they roll up in front of the place. It's like New Yorkers, it's like 9 o'clock or something like that at night.
Sure.
Summer night, patio's full,
I
right?
bet.
Gorgeous. That's the stuff you dream about, right? He gets out of the car, and then you hear this woman saying, "Oh my God, it's Tony Bourdain," right? So he's trying to get to the kitchen. He has to stop to sign autographs and get places, right? But it's like, this was home. Leal was home. And this was something as a freelancer, the one advantage I did see in that kind of office work like thing, right? That career I had doing different call center works or logistics or whatever was like the office was kind of like your ship.
Sure.
Dunder Mifflin type of thing, right?
Yeah.
And so like there's I missed having that space. So now when I'm in the tap room, like I just came back from a meeting today, right? Like I had an Insta meetup with some Instagram folks from Dundas at the tap room.
Right.
It's my home away from home.
Sure.
I'm lucky to have two. I actually have the other place, right? Like so like I have these homes away from home now that I can just come and hang out.
Exactly.
And there's something about being in a physical space. So like everything culminated with him going back to Leal and getting in the kitchen. There's Carlos Laguna, right? The guy who took over from him.
Right.
And like they're all kind of looking at him like he's like, oh shit, he's gonna cook something.
Yeah,
he's gonna fuck up our line. Like what it is, right?
Right.
So then he goes and cooks. It's like, imagine having that. That's that aspect of the hospitality thing I love. It's like your restaurant, your bar, it becomes that place of home.
The person coming back, the off-duty chef, whatever you want to say, the person who normally working there, coming there, it's an interesting thing, right? Like you're now a customer, but you're not really, and you feel comfortable there, and there's no pressure of you having to be on and take care of anyone.
Yeah,
right.
Well, I mean, I was, admittedly, for the last couple of weeks, I was getting chirped by someone.
Yeah.
We both know, right?
Okay.
Who's kind of just like, oh, I get it. I was in on a day that I said I wasn't available to work. I was like, yeah. And it's like, oh, I get it. You just don't want the hours. I'm like, no, man. I need to enjoy the fruits and benefits of my own workplace, because then how enthusiastic do you think I'm going to be as a customer?
Sure.
Otherwise, right?
Exactly.
When someone comes, not as a customer, sorry, as a server, right? When other customers come in,
yeah.
And it's just like, the best sign of a place that people love is when the staff is hanging out.
Big time.
Otherwise, they would just up and leave.
Sure.
Right?
100%.
They want to get out as soon as they possibly can. Some days are like that. That's just work.
Yep.
But when you have a place that the staff is coming back to and bringing their friends to, you're in a great place.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. And again, like community after the pandemic and the lockdown, I don't know about most people listening, but I remembered saying I was generally respectful of service workers anyway, but especially now, because now we're as you said, right? We're providing the context for the experience of community.
Totally.
In real life. And who knows what life is gonna drop kick us with next. Right? Just beat our asses into the ground with next.
Right.
That stops this experience from happening. They're already saying in the fall the food price thing, combined with a potential resurgence of COVID, as of this recording, who knows if that's going to happen? Sure. Right. But I mean, that's what they're saying is very likely. So what does that mean? I know government wise, both of our federal and provincial levels they just got reelected. They may not hesitate locking us down, knowing that they have like 4 years before we have to vote vote that. We'll forget. Right. So I'm afraid of these things, right? It doesn't keep me up at night. If they lock us down, I'm out of a job. Sure. Twice. Are we going to have benefits? I don't know.
And again, it's a shame that they're going after that part of things, right? Yeah. Where again, not to go too deep away or too far away, it's an area that is easily controllable. It's already bending over backwards for health regulations and liquor laws and all that stuff. So if you're going to impose more stuff, they're going to follow it.
I don't think people truly appreciate how clean how much cleaning we do.
Oh my gosh.
Right?
Sure. And every place.
You run out of stuff happens. You run out of toilet paper. You run out of soap. The customer comes in, right? And it goes back to Tony saying, can you check the bathroom? It's like, sometimes, to use the expression, shit happens. Yeah. The timing is bad. Right. And maybe you were 10 minutes away from having a staffer go in and check in, right? But then suddenly that becomes the Google review. Mm-hmm. Oh, 1 star. Oh, the food was great. Everything was awesome. It was amazing. I enjoyed it, but the bathrooms were dirty. Right. Right. And it's like you caught. It's you have so much, and then you have to go on the Google review, and you either have to answer it, or it just becomes a hassle, right? But we are cleaning every night.
Yeah.
This isn't like your kitchen.
No.
Right? You can leave that thing to become a cesspool if you want and still make meals. Nobody cares.
Right.
You have to scrub everything down, wipe everything down, sanitize everything. That was before the pandemic.
Totally.
Right?
Let alone now.
Yeah, and it's like, and customers staying late because you love it so much. We're happy to oblige you, but beyond a certain point, we have to clean after you go, right?
Yeah.
And you're keeping us late from our families, like that's something that just, consider that, right?
Yeah. The respect. That's where I want.
Yeah.
That's where hopefully we can leave everyone today with too. Is that idea of respect the people that are the liaisons of your experience.
Yeah.
Right. They're there. Whether it's the chef, whether it's the server, whoever you're seeing, they're the ones that are providing a background for your experiences and your memories and everything like that. And obviously we're not saying that they have to be treated any differently than anyone, but again, don't treat them worse. Because they're there, everyone's got other experiences too, and we're in people have chosen to do these jobs too, right? Yeah, so respect that.
And by no means don't accept. You don't need to take bad service either, because that is our jobs. We got to do better, right? Like I made a mistake the other day with a customer. Customer gave me the feedback. I said, "I'm so sorry. I apologize." Right? It's just a dumb thing that I should have handled better, right?
Sure.
This is part of it, though. You want to learn. It's like we made it better. The customer came back like a couple of days later. We're happy to see each other. She's like, I hope it wasn't too bad. It's like, no, it's fine.
Absolutely.
Good day. This is how and this is part of that EQ, right? It's part of it. But we it would be nice to have that kind of reciprocity a lot of the time, and a bit of compassion, right? And I think like all around in general. And again, tying it off to Anthony Bourdain, it's like he showed me that.
That's what it is. And that's what it is. I think that's what anyone can take away.
Yeah.
Hopefully anyone watching this, is a fan of Anthony Bourdain. But if you're not, again, that's something that you can take away from him is being able to go to places with compassion and passion and not shy away from certain things that might be different. I think that's a big thing, because there's so many experiences. And again, because our food is an art form, right? There's so many different things. There's McDonald's, and then there's, art that's going to be in a hotel, and then there's, the Met, and then there's like, Leal and Michelin star places and stuff, right? Where again, it's a spectrum, and there's no difference. They're both still artwork, right? So if you can go out there and take any advice from Anthony Bourdain, is go out there and not be afraid of things and experience things, without reservations.
No reservations. Yeah.
Is there any place you want to shout out anywhere? You want to any restaurants in town you love, and then drop all your Instagram and anywhere people can find you. Let us know.
All right. So, restaurants off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Best Chinese. Yeah. Right. Authentic Chinese. Mr. Gao's.
Mr. Gao's.
Made West. Right.
Tremendous.
The Mapo Tofu. Incredible. I had to try some of the clay pots too, but I've been waiting. That got me through lockdown. Okay. You couldn't eat in the restaurant. Now you can't. I have to make some time to go and actually have the clay pot stews. He's got a whole bunch of dishes like that.
Very cool.
Dundas Shawarma.
Yeah.
Just right around the corner from the Thirsty Cactus.
Yeah.
The garlic sauce that he makes is I don't know what he's doing. He's elevated that to an art form. So it's actually brilliant. Better than the chain places that I won't mention.
Unreal.
That have come through.
Sure. No hate.
Really fantastic. Again, Dunas Verdes. I need to. I must make another return to Dunas Verdes.
Amazing. Are they more? So sorry, not to get too far. Are they like Azortian Portuguese? Do you know? Is it more like?
I think they were Azorian.
Because most of the Portuguese in town are from the Azores.
The Azores, yeah. Which also I learned from. Yeah.
Crazy, eh?
Yeah. So there's lots of places.
Where else?
Let's see. I mean. A couple of places. I was about to name places that closed. So
shoot!
During the pandemic, right? But I do have my favorites, like the Thirsty Cactus, Cafe Domestique is a nice little coffee shop. I really enjoy them.
Wonderful.
Shout out to Sean and Ed, Grain and Grit, right?
Absolutely.
And and Fairweather, as breweries in town.
Totally.
Shout out to Mulberry Coffee Shop, Coffee House, right?
Unreal.
And KW Barbecue, right next door.
Yeah.
Saigon Asian House in Westdale.
Right.
So for some Vietnamese food.
Tremendous.
Like there's just so many
Love
great
Saigon.
places. Yeah. I have my favorites, and I'm always open for more. Right?
For sure.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure you'll post stuff and stuff. So if there's any new places, where's everyone going to find you?
So my personal account is Jody Aberdeen, all one word.
Check it out.
My Stories of Uncle Tony is exactly what it sounds like. That's my Anthony Bourdain tribute account. It is. I am not an Insta expert, so I'm not a social media manager. So sometimes I will. This is usually the time where I get more requests for stories. I'll solicit them as well.
Totally.
Repost, reshare. Saturday, June 25th, 2022 is Bourdain Day. I'll be working a shift during most of it.
Okay.
Which is actually, which is kind of fitting, right?
Yeah,
it's my
absolutely.
first shift working. So
That's perfect.
If you have stories related to Tony, I've been asking people, if you've gone to a place, I didn't even talk about Paris. I actually took a solo trip to Paris.
Oh, cool.
Following Tony's example, where I just wandered the streets. I didn't go to the touristy things. I actually did that. So that was 100% Tony.
Amazing.
Right. That's another time, I suppose. But like these are all things, right? So
Wonderful.
I've been asking people, it's like, if you've been to a place that Tony's been, send me a picture of Tony in that place. Send me a picture of you in that place. Tell me your story. DM me, tag me, right? And this is not just for Bourdain Day. This is year round, right?
Totally.
Am I looking at the account every day? No. But tag me anyway. I'll reshare it when I get around to it. But I think it's a great tribute to a guy that really changed the world for a lot of people. And also, it's just good for us as people now as we move into this big unknown of almost, everything.
Sure.
Just to keep that open mind. Remember that you don't need to be afraid of other people who are different than you, right? And again, like what Tony said, right? It's like when somebody cooks for you, they're telling you a story. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, just keep your mind open and keep your taste buds open.
Yeah.
And you'll have some amazing experiences. Again, thank you so much for coming. I can't wait to do this again.
Yeah.
Again, it's interesting, trying to figure out so much information. We can keep going. We could probably keep talking forever. So
yeah.
I can't wait to have you on again. Thanks everyone for listening. Again, follow Jody on all of his social media accounts there. I'll post everything in the description of the video on YouTube, and then everyone on Instagram there. So check us out. Again, thank you so much for listening. Make sure to hit that bell and subscribe to the channel so you can get all of our YouTube content. If you ever want to reach out again, hit us up on our Instagram at the Bigmark Pod, or on our Twitter at the Bigmark Podcast. DM us there. You can always let us know if you want to hear a topic of some type, or let us know what you think of the podcast. If you can, wherever you're listening, please give us a 5-star review if you like the podcast. It does wonders for us, pushing us forward in the algorithm and all that stuff. And again, if you wanted to help us out, check our Patreon at patreon.com/thebigmarkpod. Thank you everyone for listening. We'll see you soon. Peace.